Hey, this is Jason, and in this series on how to sell your land in Texas, I want to continue answering this question that often people have when going through the process of selling land. What's the exact process of closing a land sale? As in any real estate transaction, it's not simply, you give the person the money and they give you the deed or the property. There's a little more of a process there because of the legalities of it and the documents, and very important for all those things to be done right. So there is an order, and I want to walk you through step by step from start to finish. Now, I am going to explain this. You can potentially, and sometimes this is done with low-cost properties, you could actually sell the property directly yourself. I'm going to recommend that you find a properly licensed title company or real estate attorney to help you in that process. If you don't have any experience, I would not recommend doing it yourself, but it can be done, if you know what you're doing. But I'm going to talk today about the process of using a title company or a real estate attorney to close a land sale. Okay, so let's talk about the steps. Steps to closing a land sale. So the very first step is that both parties, the owner of the land, that's the seller, and the buyer or potential buyer that is bringing the offer, is going to sign a purchase agreement. Now, you can simply go back and forth and come to a verbal agreement on the price, but it isn't legal or binding until it's on paper in the form of a purchase agreement. So I'll just pull up what that looks like. When you're buying a house, oftentimes realtors will use a state purchase agreement form, and it has quite a few disclosures and different things on there about, do you know if there's issues with the well, or is there radon, or whatever they know about the house and the residence. With land, there's not as many requirements in that sense. It can be very simple. This is a very simple purchase agreement form that I use to buy property from sellers in Texas and in other states. And you could use something very similar to this. This is just over a page long. It's just got 12 little paragraphs, and both have to sign it, buyer and seller. And it's just very simple. Both information, mailing address, the date. Important to put the county and state, and then the parcel number. That's from the assessor's office. The APN or assessor's parcel number, and the legal description of the property. Now, this wouldn't have to be the long one off the deed. It could just be the shortened version that's on the assessor's office site, but this is going to define clearly what property. Maybe that you own several lots and you just want to sell one, or a portion. It needs to be clear in the legal description. And then commonly known as, this is for rural vacant land. You could put the property address if it's just like a lot in the city. But if it's out in the country and doesn't have a street address, you could just abbreviate something like 20 acres of vacant land, or 20 acres of land on highway, whatever, wherever the road is, closest road, just to give it a reference point. And then, as it says here, the price, you're going to put the price on there. And then a couple of these paragraphs are important. This talks about who's paying the back taxes, if there are any taxes owed. And then the closing costs. When we buy land from sellers, we pay the closing costs. We generally do. Oftentimes, when you work with the consumers, your end buyer is going to want you to pay half of the closing costs, and they'll pay half. That's kind of the standard in the industry. And then the closing date is very important. No one can, not very often at least, can a real estate transaction be closed very quickly. Quick for a real estate transaction is like 30 days or less. Usually for land, it can be done in that. It's kind of depending on the title company or attorney you choose to use, how busy they are or how diligent they are at getting the documents together and getting it done. So a closing date would be set, and then you both need to sign this, and that becomes a legally binding agreement. Okay, so that is an agreement. Once you've signed that, that buyer can actually obligate you. They could take you to court and sue you to make you sell them the property if you tried to back out. So make sure you think about it before you sign it, and you're happy with the terms. Once that's signed, you're going to take this to a title company or an attorney that works in real estate closings. You could find one local there in the county and state You could also find one that's a statewide, but usually they partner with local ones anyway. So call around, find some with good reviews in the local area, somewhere near the county seat. Usually there's multiple title companies because they're going to be going over and doing documents there at the county recorder's office. So you're gonna send them that purchase agreement. Usually you can call them and then just send it in by email. And they're gonna want information, your information, contact information, and the buyer's information, both parties. And then the third step is you're gonna wait. Title company is gonna go to work. It'll be crickets for a while. You won't hear much from them for a couple weeks at least. And usually within 2 to 3 weeks, they do a preliminary title search and they come back with a title commitment. Okay, and I'll just pull up what this looks like. Title commitment, here's one from Permian Basin Abstract Company. This is a Texas company in the Permian Basin that's a title company, and they have a whole bunch of disclosure information, and it looks like they use First American title insurance. So it says commitment for title insurance. So the idea here is when you're buying and going through a title company or an attorney, you have the option to buy title insurance. Now you can sell land without it, but usually title companies are gonna highly recommend, if not require. And what that does is basically says they're doing the research and making sure that the chain of title is clear, there are no problems or issues, and that the person who's selling the property has the rights and authority to sell it to you. There's no other liens or judgments on the property, nothing that's going to rear its ugly head later and cause issues. And the insurance policy they sell you, and they do sell you this, and it usually costs about $500 to $1,000, even for vacant land. It's not cheap. That is guaranteeing that if anything were to come up later down the road, that insurance policy would reimburse your purchase price. So you wouldn't be, up a creek without a paddle. So you can see there's just a couple forms, and they have some requirements. And if you go down a couple pages, important notice, those are all the disclaimers. Schedule A, it starts the information. You can see the policy amounts, and it talks about, the legal description of the property, and then there's some exceptions and such. So you're going to get the title commitment. You want to look over it. If there's any issue there, they're going to tell you, okay, hey, there's someone else showing up with ownership rights, or there's this or that we found, and they're going to hopefully suggest a way to resolve that. Now, that's an important step. And then the fourth step is, if the title commitment comes through good, everything's ready to go, the title company usually will then set a closing date within a week or two after contacting you. It takes them a little bit of time. They have to kind of organize that depending on how busy their schedule is. And they're going to give a closing date and start to prepare the documents for the closing. And the closing date traditionally was a time where you, if you're the buyer or if you're the seller and you're selling your land, you would go to the title company's office. They usually have, some conference rooms you can do this in, and you would meet there with their attorney or the workers there from the title company, and you would also meet with the buyer. And the three of you would meet together, and they're kind of a third party that has you fill this out and that out. And you'd either bring if you're the buyer, you'd bring a cashier's check. Usually if it's under $50,000, you can bring a cashier's check. If it's over that amount, they require a wire transfer, and you transfer the funds to the title company through escrow. They hold them for a day or so, or even for a few hours, and then they will pay that out to the seller once all the documents are signed. Nowadays, they're doing closings a lot because of different situations with COVID and things. There are a lot of closings that are becoming mobile. Other people maybe live out of state. And so don't think that you have to go to the title company to close the deal. It's definitely not happening now. And for many years it's been this way. Just because people maybe they own land in one state and you live in another state, that's okay. What the title company will do is set a closing date, and then they'll prep a closing packet to send you by FedEx that you can sign the documents and FedEx back to them. All right, so continuing the steps. So once they set a closing date, usually within a couple days of that closing date, they're going to send you, almost always by email, a settlement statement. Okay, and they're gonna send you some documents for the closing, and it'll usually have at the minimum a settlement statement and wiring instructions. Now, a settlement statement is not required to buy or sell land. It's just the standard practice. It actually is called a HUD-1 form. It's used as a standard form in the industry for mortgages on properties for lenders. So it has information about who the lender is and what the fees are and all that kind of stuff. It sounds a little odd if you're doing a cash purchase, and we're going to assume that you're just selling it to a cash buyer, your land, or buying land from a cash buyer. But if we, let's see, I do have one of those pulled up here. Here's just a sample of this. Settlement statement, HUD-1. This is just for a cash purchase of land. And it's going to have some information for the buyer and seller up above. And then there's these two columns, and one is the buyer and one is the seller. And it's got this one named as the borrower up here, but technically that's the buyer. And so it just has the gross amount due from the borrower. So that's important. You can see that right here, the gross amount due from the borrower. That's the amount that's got to be paid, right? And then the seller, and it'll have information for the seller on how much they actually get. So it's including things like the closing costs. Here's the title insurance policy. You can see that was $546 on this one. Some other fees, other title insurance fees, deed fees, etc. And so then there's the total settlement charges, and the charges for this could be quite expensive at times. And so you can see all the information there. So they're going to send you that, and you want to read over it, and you want to make sure that everything is exactly how you understood it to be. Usually when you call the title company and hire them and send them a purchase agreement, you're going to ask them ahead of time what their fees are, what the fee schedule is. So there shouldn't be any surprises. Maybe something comes up differently or there was a misunderstanding. Always read over that form. As a general rule, they do a very good job of preparing these, but there are times where they've missed stuff, I have noticed. So just check it over, and then they're going to require you to sign that form in most cases to just approve that form and send it back to them. They also send wiring instructions for you. Like I said, some title companies for lower cost sales under a certain amount, a certain dollar amount, like $30,000 to $50,000 or maybe less, you can just take a cashier's bank check. But if you're going to go physically to the closing, if you're closing from a distance, remotely, which I do all the time, you're going to wire the funds. So they're going to give you the wiring instructions. You go down to your bank and you just wire the funds out. You need to do that a day ahead of time because the wires do take 12 hours or so to go through and process until the next day. They aren't immediate. They do take a little bit of time. So make sure you do it at least a day ahead of time. And the title company is going to hold those funds in escrow in their account. So no worries there. It's safe. And then on the closing day, the seller is going to sign the deed. Now, if it's a remote closing, they might actually send the seller the closing packet information and the deed to sign. That has to be signed in front of a notary. Every state in the US, and specifically in the state of Texas, only the seller needs to sign the deed. They're considered the grantor on the deed, and they need to sign it in front of a notary public because that document is going to be recorded at the county level. So oftentimes the title agency will send these out, a few days ahead of time. Sometimes they'll send it to you by email and you can print them. Then you're going to go get that notarized and you're going to FedEx it back to them. So you want to do it a couple days ahead of time so they have it in time for the closing. All right, and they will give specific instructions about that. And if you don't understand, just ask them. And then once they've signed that and sent it back to the title company, as of the closing day, the title company prepares those documents and they send a copy of those to the buyer. They send the funds to the seller, the settlement funds after all their fees. And then they take the deed and they register it. They send it to the county recorder's office to be registered. So the buyer will sign the title company documents, and then the title company can send the deeds to be recorded. Okay, so that is the complete process of how a land sale transaction works. It could be another step or two if you have a loan. You might need an appraisal before the closing. But for a cash sale, this would be all the steps that you need to know. Okay, thanks for watching this, and stay tuned for more information on how to sell your land in Texas.